Hi, everyone, and welcome to Pushing the Boundaries, our panel discussion where we're going to talk about real-time analytics and what does it mean for all of the panel's guests here today. I'm going to be the host. My name is Adi Pollack. I'm leading the analytics advocacy team in Microsoft, where we focus on the Microsoft Cloud and the full stack analytics on the Microsoft Cloud. Before that, I worked as a senior developer engineer, building big data infrastructure, building what used to be Lambda architecture that a lot of people are familiar with. I have a master's degree in cybersecurity and machine learning and a thesis in that field as well. I'm currently writing a book for O'Reilly on designing machine learning systems with Apache Spark ecosystem. It should be released in the upcoming months. Yes, and this we're going to talk about real-time analytics. What's the difference between that and batch? Is batch even a thing still? What does it mean for our business? And a first guest is going to be Gwen Shapira. Gwen Shapira, welcome to our online stage.
Thank you, Adi.
Gwen Shapira is an engineering leader of Cloud Native Kafka at Confluent.
Excited to be here with you.
Happy to have you. Next in line, we're going to have Kishore Gopkrishna, co-founder and CEO of Startree, and also co-author of Apache Peanut. Hi, Kishore.
Hi, Adi. Thank you so much. Hi, Gwen. Super excited to be here.
Great to have you. Next, Eric Sammer, CEO of Decodable. Hi, Eric.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. So today we're going to talk about real-time analytics. And my first question for everyone here is, when and why did real-time analytics become important? Gwen, would you like to start?
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to it. I mean, for me, a lot of it is around the technology transformation, like harder got both better and cheaper. And a bunch of tools were created all the way from the high performance storage of different types, high performance ingest that became reality with Apache Kafka, my favorite project. High performance stream processing. There are multiple very successful projects in that space. All of those being just open source technologies and becoming very popular really made it possible for many more companies. You didn't need rock stars and super intense specialists to deliver a real-time experience to your users.
Interesting. Yeah. Kishore, what would you like to share on that topic?
I have a quite interesting take on this, right? I somehow think that real time was always important. It's not like something made it really more important. It's just that if you kind of look at the definition of real time, it's really from the point at which an event occurs to the time it takes for you to respond to that event, right? So the key thing for us to consider is like, what is the value by responding it for an event in a millisecond, in few minutes, or even hours or weeks, right? And what is the value that the business is getting out of it? And the second part that comes to that question is that, or the dimension is like, how much does it cost to actually react very quickly, right? And every business today is basically asking that question is like, is the value high enough so that I can actually respond to it very quickly? And the cost, is it getting lower and lower? And I think the trend that we are seeing in the industry, as Gwen mentioned, is the cost is actually reducing because of all the innovations that's happening and it's being available to the masses, right? So real time has always been there. The big companies have been doing it for a long time because they can afford it. They can actually get a lot of ROI. The trading industry, the finance industry has been doing it for a long time. I think it's really that the evolution of the technologies like Kafka, Pinot, and others, which have actually made it possible for us to not only react to this very quickly, but also extract a lot of value in a single event.
Yeah, I see a lot of people heading their heads here on the screen. Eric, what is your take on that?
I mean, I definitely agree with both Gwen and Kishore on this one. I think that the interesting thing for me and sort of talking to customers and stuff like that, and over the last 10 or so years, I think we've seen a pretty big shift in user expectations, both consumer users of systems and enterprise users of systems. So I think like there's a couple of leaders who have really set a bar around what we should expect from people or expect from systems. And I think like these days, if you were to place an order online and not be able to see your package being delivered, or not get those notifications, or you're browsing a website and like you don't get the right product recommendations, you get something that is like outdated by some like long period of time. I think our expectations have just been shifted in a way where when you're working with a company or using a service that isn't actually operating in real time, you really feel this. I had this experience just the other day where I was clicking around on something in the marketing application. I won't name names, but all of the analytics based on what I was doing were not showing up in the dashboard. It was basically like, you have no clicks on this piece of content. I'm like, that's crazy. I'm clicking on it in the other browser window. And so like my expectations are just totally shifted based on what has happened over the last 10 years, based on all the stuff that Kishore and Gwen are talking about. So I think for most users, like you just become conditioned to that. And anybody who doesn't do that and doesn't sort of pull up with the technology is just going to get left behind over the next 5 years. I think you have about a 5-year window to fix your data infrastructure and start working that way. Otherwise, you're just going to get outpaced by everybody else who does.
Yeah.
Well, 5 years window is, go ahead.
No stress.
No stress at all. I mean, moving big data infrastructure doesn't take time at all. The migration is super easy.
just have 5 years for that. No, I mean, Eric, is one of the things there is like the competitiveness, right? I think everyone is pushing each other right now, like because the customers are demanding, the businesses are figuring out what value they can extract out of it. And then it's just that competitive thing across the companies are also pushing each other to provide this real time pretty much for everything, right? I can't even think of a single event right now where you can't actually react to it as soon as possible and then provide a lot of value.
Interesting. So we have 5 years, you're saying, to move, right?
Maybe I'm being generous. I'm sort of pulling that number out of thin air. I mean, another way to look at it is, I don't even think that it requires that. I mean, in the past, these large technology shifts have been driven by like hardware life cycles and how fast can you like update infrastructure in your data center and how can you hire the talent, stuff like that. These days, there's 1,000,001 companies, 4 of which are on this particular panel, that are offering these things as services. And so like your excuse for not updating infrastructure and not being able to incrementally adopt is, I personally don't understand it. I think that like all the tools are there. They're available as services. We're out of the day and age of like running like large clusters of stuff by hand and 50-person teams that sort of like poke these big distributed systems. I mean, now you can sort of buy these things from, like I said, sort of all these companies, on this panel. I don't think it should take 5 years, but it probably
I don't think you have 5 years. I think we're underestimating the bed cycle when your company is no longer seen as innovative and leading in the space. You will not be able to hire the people. You will not be able to convince the customers to stick around. I mean, people have options, both your employees and your customers. And it's also as easy as it is to get new technology and new services. It's also very easy to switch.
Well, not to mention, by the time you start to feel the impact of this in like your customer adoption and growth and like all these other kinds of things, you've already lost, right? That's a lagging indicator on what's happening to your business, right? So like if you're a consumer company, if you're an enterprise company, by the time you start shedding customers because somebody else can do something faster or give a better customer experience, you've kind of already lost. Right? Like you're already on a decline, and that's a really hard thing to pull up out of.
Yeah. I think there's still a big exponential growth in the data as well, right? I mean, if you kind of, to Eric's point, I mean, he did bring out 5 years, but that's the next 5 years is where we are actually seeing the explosion. If you look at the numbers, even out of all the data that is getting generated, I think only 5% is really available in real time, right? And it's and it's going to become 25% in the next 5 years. So that's the big jump that's going to happen in the next 5 years, where pretty much every data that is getting generated is going to be available in real time. So it's really up to the business on what they can do and how can be more creative in terms of improving their customer experience. So it's happening as it's you either adapt or you fade out. That's the reality.
That's really interesting because we're touching a lot on customers and real-time analytics bringing innovation in how, everyone here, how in your experience, real-time analytics already transform the world? What kind of use cases you can show and bring up that you're familiar with?
Hey, I'm in a panel discussion with a lady sitting about 10,000 miles away in a different continent, in a different time zone.
Yes.
I think that, Kishore mentioned some of them earlier, right? I think FinServe, like fintech in general, has always had at least one real-time component, like the high frequency trading and the algorithmic analysis and those kinds of things. I think those folks sort of have been doing this for a very long time. And then of course, ad tech has always been real time. Behavioral targeting systems, ad optimization systems. Then it came into like search quality systems and relevance ranking systems and those kinds of things. And those were very sort of tech savvy. But I think that in the last decade or so, I mean, you have these like companies that are exclusively real time, logistics companies. You think about something like Uber and Lyft, how would that work if you couldn't actually have real-time data? Like the idea that you order your Lyft and then like next week you get an email that says your driver has arrived. Like none of that business doesn't work any other way. So I think that all of these location-based services, fraud, I mean, Adi, you probably know it better than I do, but like security related use cases, threat detection and remediation and response, all those kinds of use cases, I think are, observability, credit card fraud, account takeover, all these other kinds of things are sort of exclusively real-time cases. I honestly don't know how we did them 10 years ago. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think to add to that, right? I think there are a lot of other industries that are starting. I mean, these are some ad industry, fintech, and these are all the things that have done and capitalized on this. But this is actually getting into health industry. That's where we are seeing majority of the new revolution as well, right? Why do I have to go to a hospital when I know that there is going to be a 1 hour waiting period, right? Like if it is already delayed, like just tell me that, hey, leave at a later time, because I don't want to just go and sit in the hospital. So there is so much innovation that's going on even in the health industry just to figure out, capitalize on this, right? And the last one of the key things that is also increasing here is like really the rise of personalized analytics, right? It's not just, when you think about real-time analytics, people think about the decision makers who are within the company, the CEOs, the data analysts, the scientists, and things like that. But I think the key thing that is changing here is like even going beyond that, right? Is like just every restaurant owner, every Lyft rider, all these guys need insights in real time, and being able to provide access to the data in a way that they can consume is like just changing, and everyone is expecting that. And that I think is the way this thing is going to get transformed in the industry, that pretty much everyone will have access to data and they will be able to act on it and make their own decisions, right? They don't need someone else to make the decision for them. They will be able to make the decisions for themselves.
Yeah. Maybe I can challenge all of you here today. So we know we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of support, a lot of companies are already doing it, already delivering products that are based on real-time analytics. But what are still the challenges that you see with customers and in the industry? Gwen, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think first one is that I see very little consensus with our customers and in the industry in general, and what real-time even means, like to businesses, to users. Like I feel like we could make a lot more progress as an industry if you could actually agree on the problem we're trying to solve and what value will it bring to everyone. I think that's kind of what we're doing here today, in a sense. The other thing is that, and without hurting and feelings of anyone in this room, we're all working hard on it. We have about 20 years of tooling and best practices and techniques to catch up on. I mean, I think all of us, before we've been doing stream processing, we have been doing batching. And we may have gotten a bit spoiled by having gazillion. If I want to design something, I open a book. There are a lot of proven ways to do what I did, a lot of tools. I know I have to validate, it's fine. There's a lot of tools to do validation. I know I have to test, it's fine. There's a lot of platforms for testing. Like observability, all those things have existed. The batch industry had about 4 decades of building them. We've started at a very generous estimate maybe a decade ago. So I feel like we have still a bunch of catching up to do. And I know we're working as hard and as fast as possible on solving this.
Yeah, to add to that, right? I think the key thing that, I mean, again, as Gwen mentioned, is like the evolution is happening in a lot of different areas, right? It's not just the real time that is one thing. There's innovation happening in data formats, like people are going from structured to unstructured, right? It's no longer easy to parse that, and it's no longer easy to make sense out of that. Then there are so many other evolutions that's happening, innovations that are happening in the storage industry, in the processing, in the capturing. So if you kind of look at the whole pipeline of like what it takes to capitalize on a single event, it's like you have to capture it, you need to process it, you need to store it, you need to analyze it, and then you need to act on it. And there is a huge impedance mismatch in terms of across all the systems and the rate at which they themselves are actually innovating. Innovations are happening in each of these areas. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges, like, oh, these things are like moving in like very, very different rates. Like, how do I put all these things together? By the time I put something together, something has already completely changed, and then it has become to the next level. Like, so that is the biggest challenge for people. Like, how do I put this all these puzzle pieces together, and then have a very cohesive story, right? I think people who are actually starting today have an advantage because they can kind of look back in the last decade and like look at all the things that have happened, and then at least they can get some of the pieces right from the get-go. But if someone is looking at it now and then still goes back and starts in batch, then they're really in for a surprise very soon, because now very soon they will have to change everything to real time, and that's going to be huge uptake, a huge task for themselves.
I think it's really, I think both, again, Gwen and Kishore are absolutely right about this. My sense here is that like the absence of tooling or the lack of maturity around tooling and the processes and the architectures around these kinds of systems, some stuff is different enough that it isn't as simple as like sort of like, you know, copy paste of like the old sort of architecture and those kinds of things. Just like as a very sort of simple example, like I talked to a bunch of people, you know, and like 100% of customers that we've talked to at Decodable are like, you know, somebody upstream changes a field in a web application, they add a new field, and the schema change ripples through the system. And all of a sudden, a bunch of models at the other end of the system are dealing with this thing that they've never seen before. And like, it just doesn't make sense. And the model blows up and there's nulls where there shouldn't be. Like data quality issues, schema management issues, replaying data, right? Like we found a bug in our code. Now we want to like rewind, go back, replay, and sort of fix whatever we did. These kinds of things that in the batch world arguably were easier, right? If you could sort of like fit in between the scheduler, right? If you could fix the data in between the time that the workflow scheduler ran, you were okay. You could sort of pave over these kinds of issues. The online real-time world is not as forgiving of those kinds of things, because if you've got a bug, you know, to use the driver dispatch, you know, sort of example from earlier, like by the time somebody is supposed to get picked up, like the bug has already impacted them, right? Like they're already just like standing on a street corner, like a dum-dum in the rain, right? Like, it has real world implications. And those implications get worse as you get into like oil and gas and like IoT and sensor and healthcare and like security and all these other kinds of things. So they go from minor annoyances to real issues, I think, for people. And, I think Gwen said it really well. Like, the batch offline world has had more time than most of us have been in the industry to try and fail a bunch of different techniques, architectural patterns, tooling, paradigms of like design around these kinds of systems and stuff like that. Whereas the real-time world, you look back 10 years, we are not the first people to try and solve real-time data processing, right? Like, we sort of acknowledge the people who came before us. The challenge there is that like a bunch of the back-end infrastructure and algorithms and distributed checkpointing systems and like all these kinds of, like, the technology is caught up, the research is caught up. And so now we can do these things at scale, but all of the techniques around what would be considered trivial and boring operational tasks are just super painful. And like, that's on us. I think we just need to fix it. We just need to get good, And
you just said it, like, replay of a stream is one of the basic things we always imagined will be done in our platform. To the best of my knowledge, it's barely ever done because most people do not know how to do it.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're really, really good at hacking around at like offsets and like poking, like reserializing protobufs and like jamming them back into the state stores and like, mucking around in Znodes and Zookeeper, right? You basically have to be a magician to run some of these things at scale. And like, again, I think that's on us, right? I think that, all four of us. Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities in the space of real time. There's so many tools that we still need to develop and features. And it makes me wonder, we often use Batch for historical data, so offline data where we want to enrich the real-time data with that historical data. How do you think we can still have this ability of enriching real-time data with historical data, or should we kind of cap that historical data at some put some time on it, put some limit on it, and say, hey, we don't really need that 30 days retention that we're saving because the world is moving so fast. So what do you think? What do you see now happening?
I recently consulted to a Japanese company. They are an old company. They have 80 years of historical data. You would not be able to get them to give up. You will not be able to convince them that their history has no value. I mean, this is just not up to us to decide what is of value to our customers. Basically, I think it may depend, like industry to industry, but I think at the end of the day, if you're looking for like a complete transformation and to help everyone get to this next stage of customer expectations, you have companies with vastly different cultures than in the Silicon Valley, where yesterday is already very old.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, the reality is like this whole discussion, and maybe this is heresy, with this panel, but like, I don't think it's about streaming versus batch. I think it's about solving whatever sort of use cases somebody needs to solve. And so if the ML team says, I need every purchase event for the lifetime of this customer in order to make the right recommendation today or something like that, but I want to make that recommendation in real time, and I want that recommendation to be as good as humanly possible, it's our job to figure out the right way to solve for that. And so like, from my perspective, I mean, like, even if you want to use like data warehousing terminology, like if you have a set of slowly changing dimensions, like a user profile or something like that, or user interest, and like, you can think about that as also including aggregate information on historical data and those kinds of things. And then you have the real-time, clickstream, just again, sort of sticking with the retail example, I guess. And you're trying to sort of make an optimal experience for somebody. You need a combination of batch systems, I mean, pragmatically, I think you could sort of make everything work one way, but just as like everybody on this panel would sort of retch at the idea of like trying to just turn the batch crank faster, I think like there's a world where certain things are probably just more natural as like snapshots and point in time and sort of like pre-canned, views on the world. And so it's about the right integration points and the right architecture to make sure that we can compute sort of current state view of the world around slowly changing dimensions, those kinds of things, and sort of join or correlate or whatever verb you like, with the real-time flow as well. And that's why I think it winds up being not one tool, but a platform of a bunch of different kinds of systems, caches, analytical database systems, messaging systems, stream processing infrastructure. It takes sort of a village, if you will, of technology to build those kinds of systems.
Yeah, I think one approach that we actually followed heavily at LinkedIn, right, for such questions like how long is historical data is really important? Like, is it 1 day, 3 days, 5 days? I think one of the systemic thinking that we did at LinkedIn is the experimentation framework, because every use case is different and every user is different, every model is different. So there are a lot of variables here, but having a very, very, very good experimentation framework in your company takes you a long way. We actually did how long should we know about the clicks and the shares and the comments that a user does? Should we do 30 days? Should we do 15 days? Do an experimentation, figure out the metric that how is the engagement increasing, decreasing. So very quickly you can actually make a data-driven decisions. I mean, given that we are talking about data, so we should not say anything about like, oh, it should be 1 year or 80 years or 50 years, but it should always be data-based. Like you can, if you have a good framework in your company in terms of measuring these based on the changes, you will always be able to come up with the right solution. And things might change. The model might change, and the model might say that, hey, I can use more data now, but given I just need like 1 day of data and I'm actually really, really good, right? So I think there are a lot of these variables. So having a very good experimentation framework takes you a long way.
And it's not just how much of the data in the past is valuable. We also have the question of how much into the future data is valuable, right? I think a lot of the use cases are into predictions, and longer-term predictions are less accurate, but they may have more value in their own way. So we kind of need to look at, real time is now, but we have to look into the past and into the future at the same time.
Yeah, so the predictive analytics it's a big thing, and if you are able to predict something accurately, the value is huge, right? And it's known in capacity planning, auto scaling. So those are all some of the things that we are already seeing in the infrastructure layer, that if you can predict and you can say that I just need X machines at this particular time, you save a lot, right? And so the predictive analytics is one of the key things that's going to happen as well, and it's already happening.
That's really interesting. I always think about the world of predictive analytics, or maybe even the advanced analytics, is kind of how we add machine learning, which is based on statistics and some linear algebra in order to extract patterns, to understand behaviors, to really get value out of our data. And then how can we attach that machine learning into real time, or what even machine learning in real time means? Are we going to use the machine learning models on fresh real-time data, or if our models going to evolve through time with the incoming fresh data? And this is always kind of the specific challenge around the advanced analytics, the predictive analytics, is what the problem that we're solving, what is the business goals, and what is the value of fresh versus historic data. I know, Kishore, you have experience with that as well from previous companies. Would you like to share?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at the machine learning world, right, there are two things. One is the model itself, and second is the data on which it operates, right? And so the data, there are two types of data features if you look at it. One is the static features, which is like who you are, what is your interest, what technology, where you're from, and that's not going to change on a minute by minute or a second by second basis. But there is another one which is increasing in the machine learning world, which is the dynamic features. How many clicks did you do? What kind of articles are you looking at right now? What is your interest level? How is it changing? So that is something that LinkedIn uses in its feed today, which is the ranking of your feed is a feed list is actually decided based on dynamic features. Like if you click on something, and there is also impression discounting, you don't want to show the same article multiple times. So there are a lot of these value that you can extract just by looking at the dynamic features, right? And then the second part is the model itself. How capable is the model learning and retraining itself on the fly when all these things are happening, right? So that's not easy. Typically, it's a background process that is running because the model trainings are expensive, and then it automatically switches it. So there are innovations happening in both these areas, both in the model area as well as in the features, right? And I think it's definitely one of the things that we will see over the next few years where machine learning is going to be also start capitalizing on the real-time data.
Interesting. So going slightly back into supporting machine learning, because we need the pipelines, we need the data to flow into our system. We need to make sure it's there. So how can we do it in real time, given that there's so many platforms, so many open source solutions, so many ways, how we can enable data engineers today to be successful when they think about real-time analytics and having real-time in mind, maybe instead of batch processing. So starting directly with real-time, how do you see that evolves in the world?
Who's going with that?
Why don't you take it? I'm interested to hear how you think about this.
Sure. I think one of the key things that fundamentally the first decisions that you want to make is real time is inevitable, right? So don't take it as a nice to have. Don't think that, oh, we are going to do it like 1 year, 2 years, 5 years down the road. I think once you have that mindset, then you start attacking the problem in the right direction and right angle, and then you start figuring out, okay, what is the right solutions that are out there, right? So there are many solutions, but the key thing for someone to look into is like real time is not a nice to have, it's a must have. And then you start with what is the minimum number of components that I need to actually solve this problem. Don't try to take like 10 pieces and then try to put all of them together, because that's another problem where you will have a huge impedance mismatch. So try to figure out, minimize the number of components that you need to solve this and pick the right component in each of them. And the way I try to analyze this is like, really the flow is like capture the data, and you need a processing layer, and you need a storage and querying layer, right? So if you kind of just fix to these, pretty much every solution that you look at it falls in this pattern, right? If you're using Kafka for capturing, you're using some stream processing for analyzing that, and you're using something like Pinot for storing it in real time, and then you have a query engine on top of it, and then you're acting on it, right? So there are already blueprints available if you look at it for what the big companies have already done, and you can take that and then use that as your initial starting point in order to achieve this, and this has worked very well for us at LinkedIn, both for just the user-facing analytics and also for the machine learning infrastructure as well.
I mean, it's not really, I'll have to admit my sort of specialization, I was going to say my ignorance, but my specialization here is more sort of on the data infrastructure side than the ML side. But having partnered with a bunch of, supporting a bunch of ML teams at various companies, it seems like there's, a couple of different ways. We sort of use this blanket term of like, do ML in real time or something like that. And like, that's probably not doing justice to the problem. Before we started the panel, talking offline, like Gwen had brought up that like there's this, and I think it's super important to think about, there's how often do you train these kinds of models? Like how fresh is the model? There's how fresh is the data that's hitting the model? There's how fresh are the sort of dynamic features that Kishore mentioned? Like how up to date are those things? And so even if you don't think about sort of training in real time, there's evaluation or scoring in real time. There's how up to date, how much does the current state of like a feature store or something like that reflect reality and like what's going on? Again, like if you back it all the way out to like the user experience, if you buy a product and then get a product recommendation for the product that you already bought, it just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, I mean, like you own that product now. And so like there are certain cases, I guess, where that makes sense, right? Where there's sort of, products that expire and stuff like that. But, in the grand scheme of things, like, you sort of have to look at those use cases and say, like, that's a bad customer experience. And that's a case where you can sort of lose a customer to somebody else who simply does it better. So in those kinds of cases, I think it's about thinking about where does real time sort of have its major benefits. And I agree with Kishore. I think, like, if you were to build these systems today, there's no reason to batch train these things once a day or something like that. So, like, I think you'd think about it differently. But, I think you sort of have to think about all the dimensions of the problem rather than just say, like, and I've heard this, batch is good enough. Because I just don't think that that's true anymore.
Yeah, I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention my thinking about the problem of how to build your data infrastructure was kind of recently influenced by a lot of material put out by Zhanak Dehghani about the idea of data mesh. So while we're rethinking everything, do you really even need a data engineering team that will tell you how to build things? Or do you want the team that actually needs the results and have a business use case and presumably funding to own their own infrastructure and be empowered to get the data from the places where it's stored into their own, as I said, feature stores and apply to their model and not depend on external teams that may be underfunded, may not really understand their business needs in order to deliver something. It seems like a very much lose-lose proposition when you think about it, that you have a team with all this pressure and that cannot really show the benefits of what they do.
This one is interesting to me. I'm kind of glad that you brought it out. I mean, this is like the centralized versus decentralized model. And like, if you look at as an analogous industry, you look like the networking world. It doesn't matter who you buy your networking equipment from. We move TCP and UDP packets, ICMP packets around the network, and all the vendor products work the same, and they all have the same constructs around, like, policy enforcement and enrichment and, like, packet mangling and modification. Like, stream processing is our packet mangler, messaging systems like, Kafka and those kinds of things are sort of our transport layer, our data transport layer. And then, like, there can be different things hanging off of those ports. It could be Apache Pinot, it can be, data lake systems, it can be different things for different sort of segments of the business. And in larger organizations, that amount of autonomy equates to speed. And so letting each team, the ML team wants Kubeflow, the data warehousing team wants, of course they want StarTree and Apache Pinot, but, like, whatever they want, they want. So allowing them to get what they want in a way that is still compliant, that still has the right governance, that still respects customer privacy, like all of the kinds of very real challenges that exist in the distributed model. I think the data mesh concept is super interesting. It mirrors, like, the microservice model. I provide a service, it's got a clean API, you consume that service. That's, like, very sort of interesting. The question is, where's the tooling? Right? Like, kind of goes back for me. Where's the tooling? Where are the patterns? Where's the infrastructure to support that model in a way that doesn't, like, make the compliance team completely lose their minds? Because, like, I'd be scared of that,
Yeah, I really want to have another panel discussion just on data mesh, because we did try to solve a lot of these problems at LinkedIn, and we have a lot of scar tissues on that, right? I mean, conceptually, it's really good. We all agree on that. It's all needed. But once you get to the next level of implementing it, there are so many things that we have learned, and I really want someone to have a very strong implementation of that, and that's going to save a ton of money and effort for all the companies. But it's a very, very hard problem, especially as you start peeling the layers and then get into the organizational issues, like the tooling issues, the infrastructure issues. There are so many things that pop out, but conceptually, it's, like, really, really good. And I think we all agree on that.
Yeah.
Almost like there is a startup or 5 waiting to happen.
Yes.
Exactly. Someone somewhere is pitching this to someone on Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley right now.
Yeah, a lot of opportunities to a lot of people. All right. So last question for our panel today. We talked a little bit about data management, about analytics, about machine learning, about fresh data, real-time data. So how do you see the future of real-time analytics? How do you imagine it or vision it in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
My answer literally just changed in the last 40 minutes based on something I've heard from Kishore that I did not, like, it just clicked the black bug that I did not realize before. The idea of personal real-time analytics and the personal insights and how it will really, like, well-built platforms that give it easily will completely change the world for small business owners, which turned out rapidly it's all of us. That's an amazing idea for what the future will be like. And we can kind of, like any good vision for the future, you can kind of see the early steps into it. And it's kind of, I haven't had time to think about it, but it completely blows my mind, this idea that in the future, we are all going to do real-time data analytics for things that impact our own life.
Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing thing. For me, that is almost like the current, because we've seen that in a lot of places. So for me, the future is really, if you look at it, real-time analytics is the consumers of that are people today. For me, the future is the consumers of that will be machines, right? So we will go from billions of users to probably trillions of machines, which are actually making these decisions automatically and then acting on it. Like if today, if you look at it, a restaurant owner is looking at the analytics and then saying, oh, my delivery time is taking too long. I need to order another, I need to get this additional set of resources to actually lower that. That will be done by machine. The restaurant manager doesn't even have to look at it. So you can actually plug in the ML models and all these things to actually act. Going back to your, that's where the revolution and the next set of innovation will come, where the machines are actually making the decisions and also acting on it, right? So that to me is like the next 10, 20 years where we want the machines to actually make these decisions based on the data.
I'm always so hesitant to make these predictions because I'm always wrong. I mean, like, I guess, whatever, I'm going to be honest with all of you. I mean, you know, I'll level with you. I think that it's really, really hard to tell what the use cases will drive. I don't know that I could have predicted on-demand delivery of everything. I don't know that I could have predicted like personal drivers at your sort of beck and call and like drones dropping off packages. I mean, the world just looks super different than like I thought it would. We still don't have flying cars, but like that's like a different problem. You know, so I don't know that I know where real-time analytics is going. That said, I think how they function and how people build those systems, I feel like I have a much better idea. I think the days of like bragging about how big your Hadoop cluster are, like those things are over, and thank God, right? You know, I think that what's super exciting to me is that, you know, these mom and pop shops, these, you know, individual entrepreneurs, these people who have sort of like hobbies can build quick applications or systems or personal analytics through sort of a set of services that are easily available and rival those of these enormous tech companies. So, you know, if you're an insurance company and you don't have a data platform team of 1,000 people, you can still do all of the same things that those kinds of companies are doing. And like, to me, as like a data platform and infrastructure person, that is like super exciting to be able to power up these things, especially in, you know, I mean, like, look, what would a global pandemic look like without real-time data infrastructure? What would vaccine rollout look like, you know, over the last 18 months? And so like we can argue the sort of theoretical value of like real-time personalized analytics, but it really sort of hits home when somebody can says, you know, somebody knows I'm available, like I'm ready to get my vaccine, I can get an appointment, I can get in, you know, these are the results, this is how it's affecting the population. Like that is literally like changing the public good. And, you know, so I don't know where they end up. I mean, I tend to think that both Gwen and Kishore are right, but, you know, I don't know where they end up. What I know is that you know, there's actually some pretty cool stuff happening, and we are able to do things that we weren't able to do before. And that to me is like a net positive, you know. I just think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think, you know, everything that you all mentioned definitely makes sense. And also, Eric, what you said about looping back to the pandemic and, you know, the year we all had, rethinking about what we would have done, you know, differently, or what of the systems that we would have created if we would known. You know, there's a lot of if else. Really shows how data move fast, how trends move fast. So we need real time, even when we're facing, even when we're building human-centric systems. We want to make sure we're on trend with the human, with recommendation, with everything. It's relevant for them. And later on with retailers and the different opportunities of real time for machines themselves. So, wow, thank you, everyone. This was amazing. Really a lot of learning, and we even, you know, we even made Gwen rethink about use cases for real time, which is really awesome. So thank you, Kishore, Eric, Gwen. I personally learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to learn more from all of you on real time, using your platform, and building the future together.
Awesome. Thank you, Adi. Thank you, Adi, Gwen, Eric. It was really amazing. I'm pretty sure one of the key things that I wanted to take here is like that we need to have another panel discussion on data mesh.
Let's do it.
I think we have a lot of interesting things to talk about there. But this was amazing. Thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you so much.